He thought she changed her mind, until little triplet girls showed up. "Please, save Mommy, she's not moving." The clink of crystal and low hum of conversation filled the upscale dining room of Marquis, one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city. Seated at a corner table near the window, Richard Blake checked his watch for the fourth time. 7:42 p.m. She was late. 42 minutes late. Richard's expression remained unreadable, but the stiffness in his jaw betrayed a hint of annoyance. He had carved out this evening, cleared his schedule, even agreed to something as out of character as a blind date arranged through a charity auction. The woman, Lila Summers, had bid on an evening with him, though he suspected it was less about him and more about the name, the company, the millions attached to it. He swirled the untouched glass of red wine and stared out the rain-slicked window. The city lights reflected off the pavement, glowing in a soft blur. She was not coming. That much was clear. Richard pushed his chair back slightly, ready to stand and leave. Then the doors of the restaurant burst open with a crash that shattered the calm. 3 little girls ran inside, small, wild-haired, dressed in pink dresses soaked by rain. Their faces were smeared with dirt, and one of them had dried blood near her temple. The hostess at the front tried to intercept them, but they darted past her. They scanned the room frantically, and then they locked eyes with Richard. Without hesitation, they sprinted to his table. The tallest of the 3, just barely older than the others, grabbed the edge of his table with trembling fingers. "Are you Richard?" she gasped. Richard stood abruptly, his chair screeching against the marble floor. "Yes." Tears spilled down the girl's cheeks. "Please, please, save Mommy. She's not moving." The words hit him like a punch. His pulse quickened. "What happened?" he asked, already crouching to their level. "They hurt her," the second girl cried. "She told us to run." "She was going to meet you," the third added, her voice cracking. "But bad men came." "Where is she?" Richard's voice was sharp now, urgent. "At home," the eldest sobbed. "They broke the door. She told us to run here to find you." A hush fell over the restaurant. Diners turned, watching the scene unfold in stunned silence. Richard reached into his pocket and dialed 911 as he grabbed the hand of the nearest girl. "I need an ambulance and police dispatch too." He turned to the girls. "What's your address?" The middle child recited it between sobs, and Richard relayed it to the dispatcher with crisp precision. "Yes. Woman down. Possible assault. Children ran to find help. I'm on my way now." He hung up. "Come with me," he said. He didn't wait for permission from the staff. He didn't stop to pay for the wine he never drank. He just moved, fast, purposeful. The triplets clung to his coat as they ran into the night. Outside, the rain had thickened. Neon lights reflected off puddles, casting a kaleidoscope of pink, blue, and gold onto the sidewalk. Richard's expensive shoes splashed through water without hesitation. The girls ran beside him, breathless, rain soaking their thin dresses. "My name is Emma," the tallest said as they ran. "I'm Ella," said the one with the scrape on her face. "I'm Ellie," whispered the smallest, barely audible, clutching his sleeve. "Mommy said if anything bad ever happened, and we got lost, we should find you." Richard's steps faltered for half a second. The weight of those words cut through everything. He didn't ask how they knew who he was. He didn't ask how they found him. He only ran faster. Ahead, down rain-slick streets. Somewhere in the darkness, a woman lay hurt, maybe dying. And 3 little girls had found their way to the only name their mother gave them. Richard would not let them down. Not tonight. The neighborhood changed as they ran. Streetlights flickered over cracked sidewalks, chain-link fences surrounded overgrown yards, and the houses became smaller, more worn. Richard followed the girls through winding side streets until they stopped abruptly in front of a narrow wooden house at the end of a cul-de-sac. The front door hung crooked on its hinges. Splintered wood lay scattered on the porch. Richard's breath caught in his throat. "You stay out here," he ordered firmly, his voice low but commanding. "Do not come inside until I say it's safe, understand?" The girls nodded, eyes wide, their tiny forms shivering beneath their soaked pink dresses. Richard stepped inside. The living room was chaos, furniture overturned, picture frames shattered. The air reeked of fear and sweat, and something metallic. And then he saw her. Lila Summers. She lay crumpled on the hardwood floor near a toppled armchair. Her once shimmering blonde hair was tangled and stained with blood. Her face, barely recognizable. Bruises bloomed across her cheekbones. Her lower lip was split. One heel still clung to her foot. The other had been flung across the room. Her blue dress was torn at the shoulder, wrinkled and stained. She had dressed for a date. She never made it out the door. Richard dropped to his knees beside her, already reaching for her wrist. Her skin was cold. "Lila," he whispered. "Lila, can you hear me?" No response. He shifted quickly, fingers searching for a pulse at her neck. There. Faint, but there. She was alive. "Come on, stay with me," he muttered. He shrugged off his suit jacket and folded it beneath her head, careful not to move her neck. Blood was seeping from a wound near her temple. He pulled a clean handkerchief from his pocket and pressed it gently against the bleeding. "Stay with me, please. Don't leave them." His voice cracked. Outside, the sound of sirens pierced the silence. Red and blue lights bathed the shattered walls in flashes of color. Richard stood and moved toward the door. "She's inside," he shouted to the paramedics. "Severe head trauma. Shallow pulse." "I didn't move her." The EMTs rushed past him with a stretcher, immediately tending to Lila. Richard turned to find the triplets had disobeyed his orders. They stood at the doorway, clutching each other, faces pale. He knelt in front of them. "She's alive," he said gently. "They're helping her now." "Is she gonna die?" Ella asked, her voice trembling. "No, not if we can help it." They watched as the medics worked. Oxygen mask, neck brace, vitals. Every movement was efficient. Practiced. Fast. "She's going to the hospital," one EMT said. "We're taking her to St. Mary's. Head trauma, possible concussion, broken ribs." "I'm going with her," Richard said. "There's no room for everyone," the driver responded. "Then take her. I'll follow." He turned to the girls. "Come with me. We're going after Mommy." They nodded and grabbed his hands. Together, they climbed into the back seat of his black sedan, water dripping from their hair, their dresses clinging to their knees. As they pulled out behind the ambulance, the youngest, Ellie, reached over and took Richard's hand. Her tiny fingers curled around his thumb, holding tight. Her voice was small, fragile. "Mommy said if we ever got lost, find the man named Richard, he'll protect us." Richard's chest tightened. He stared straight ahead, jaw locked, but inside, something shifted, broke open. They barely knew him. He had never met Lila. He had shown up for a date that never happened. And now, 3 little girls were looking at him like he was the only safe thing left in their world. He didn't say a word. He only drove faster, following the flashing lights ahead, praying he wasn't already too late. St. Mary's Hospital glowed beneath the midnight rain, sterile and humming with urgency. The emergency room doors slid open as paramedics rushed Lila in on a gurney. Richard followed close behind, the triplets clinging to his sides, their tiny hands gripping his sleeves like lifelines. "Head trauma," one EMT called. "Pulse, shallow, but present." Doctors and nurses converged, whisking her down the corridor. The doors shut behind her with a hollow thunk, cutting her from view. Richard stood frozen for a beat, then looked down at the girls beside him. Their pink dresses were damp, their cheeks streaked with rain and tears. "Come on," he murmured. "Let's wait over here." He led them to a corner in the waiting room, removed his wet blazer, and spread it over the couch so they wouldn't have to sit on the cold vinyl. The hospital air bit through their clothes. He asked a nurse for blankets and juice boxes, but none of the girls touched them. Time passed slowly. An hour, then 2. Finally, a doctor approached. White coat, tired eyes. "Are you family?" he asked. Richard stood. "No, I was supposed to meet her tonight, Lila Summers." The doctor gave a brief nod. "She has multiple injuries, severe concussion, broken ribs, facial contusions. We've placed her in a medically induced coma. There's swelling in the brain, we can't predict the outcome." "Will she make it?" Richard asked. The doctor's pause was long. "We're doing all we can, but it's uncertain if she'll survive the night." The weight of those words settled around them. The triplets didn't ask questions. Emma slid off the couch and reached out for Richard. He knelt as she climbed into his lap, small fists balled against his chest. Ella and Ellie curled up on either side of him. They didn't cry. They just held on. Richard had never felt so powerless in his life. Later, a social worker arrived, a kind woman with glasses and soft eyes. She sat beside Richard, clipboard in hand. "Sir, may I ask your relationship to the children?" "I'm not family," he said slowly. "She was supposed to meet me tonight, on a date. I didn't even know her last name until now." "But they ran to you?" "Yes." She looked over at the girls, now drifting into sleep, tangled together. "They trust you." "I know," he said quietly. "I don't understand it either." While she took notes, Richard pulled out his phone and searched for Lila's name. News articles appeared. Community profiles. A GoFundMe page. Lila Summers. Single mother of triplets. Escaped a violent marriage. Her ex-husband, Derek Cole, was wanted for domestic abuse and financial crimes. A photo loaded, Lila in front of a thrift store, holding her daughter's hands. Her hair was shorter. Her smile was exactly the same. Richard stared at the screen, heart thudding. When he looked up again, the girls were asleep. Their chests rose and fell in quiet rhythm. He loosened his tie and placed it over the armrest, then carefully draped his coat over their legs. He sat beside them, hands rubbing over his face. It had been 4 years since Julia. 4 years since he'd allowed himself to feel anything close to this. A tear slid from his eye, falling silently onto his hand. He rose and walked toward the ICU. A nurse guided him down the hall to Lila's room. She lay pale and still in the bed, her face almost unrecognizable beneath the swelling and bruises. A breathing tube rose and fell with the beeping of the heart monitor beside her. Richard stood at the foot of the bed. Then, slowly, he stepped forward. On the bedside table sat a basin and cloth. He filled it with warm water and gently began cleaning the blood from her hands. Each motion was delicate, reverent. When he reached her left palm, he paused. A stitched wound ran across it, deep, jagged. He traced along its edge with his finger, careful not to touch the sutures. He whispered, barely audible, "I don't know why I'm here, why I helped you." His eyes flicked to her face. Maybe it's because I can't watch another person, someone who means the world to someone, just disappear again." The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Outside, rain fell under the street lamps like a curtain of stars. Inside, the only sound was the steady beeping of her heart. Richard took her hand in both of his, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. 2 days passed. With Lila still in a coma and her parents unreachable due to an emergency overseas trip, the state granted temporary custody of the triplets to Richard, under strict supervision from social services. The decision, though unusual, came after one look at the girls, who clung to his arms like lifelines and refused to let anyone else near. He brought them home that night. Richard's penthouse was sleek, cold, minimal. Glass, metal, marble, designed for solitude, not for small children. That changed quickly. Pink exploded into every room. Crayons rolled across coffee tables. Half-eaten crackers ended up on imported rugs. Dolls claimed sections of his Italian leather couch. And laughter, uncertain at first, then louder, echoed off the high ceilings. The girls explored the space with wide eyes, their tiny hands trailing along polished surfaces. Ella found the button to open the blinds, and the whole city lit up outside. Ellie spun in slow circles on the hardwood floor until she fell and giggled. Emma, the boldest, asked if the bathtub in the guest room was big enough to swim in. He had no idea. That night, Richard tried to make dinner. It ended in takeout. He found a forgotten box of cereal and poured it into porcelain bowls as the girls huddled on the couch watching a cartoon. He searched online how to warm milk properly, not too hot, not too cold, and spilled half of it in the process. When it came time for bed, the chaos deepened. 3 toothbrushes, none matching. One of the girls insisted on brushing with his toothpaste, which he learned was too spicy. Pajamas were mismatched. Ellie only agreed to sleep with a nightlight. Emma needed her plush bunny, which had gone missing and resulted in a 20-minute search that ended when Richard found it under his desk. Finally, they settled in one of the guest rooms. 3 sleeping bags, 3 small bodies wrapped in pink. He sat on the floor, back against the wall, reading from a fairy tale book he had borrowed from a neighbor with kids. And then the prince said, "No more hiding. I love you just the way you are." His voice trailed off when he realized the girls were already asleep. Or so he thought. That night, around 2 a, soft sniffles pulled him from sleep on the couch. He sat up, disoriented, and followed the sound. Emma stood in the hallway, tiny hands rubbing her eyes, tears streaking her cheeks. He knelt. "Hey, sweetheart, what's wrong?" I had a dream," she whispered, "about Mommy. She was calling for us but couldn't find us." His heart clenched. He scooped her up without a second thought. She curled against his chest as he walked slowly through the darkened apartment, the city lights glowing through the windows, casting soft gold across the floors. He didn't say anything for a while, just walked. Then, quietly, Emma lifted her head and looked at him. "Mr. Richard, are you my daddy now?" The question hit him square in the chest. He stopped walking, held her a little tighter. "No, sweetheart," he said gently. "I'm not, but I'll keep you safe. I promise." Emma didn't say anything after that. She just rested her head against his shoulder and closed her eyes again. Richard carried her back to the room, laid her down carefully between her sisters, and pulled the blanket over them. He stood there for a long moment, watching them. 3 little girls in pink pajamas, faces relaxed in sleep, breathing steady. Not the triplets, not the girls. From that night on, he only thought of them one way. My girls. The beeping of the monitor was steady, rhythmic. Soft light filtered through the hospital blinds, casting pale stripes across the white sheets. The room was quiet, except for the low hum of machines and the slow, even breaths of a man slumped in a chair beside the bed. Richard's head rested against the edge of the mattress, his hand still clasping hers. His suit jacket had long since been discarded, sleeves rolled up, dark circles under his eyes marking the exhaustion of too many sleepless nights. Then, movement. Lila's fingers twitched faintly beneath his. Her eyelashes fluttered. Slowly, painfully, she blinked against the harsh light. The ceiling blurred into view. Then the room. Then him. Her voice was barely a breath. "You came. You really came." Richard stirred at the sound, lifting his head. His eyes locked with hers, and something cracked inside him. Raw emotion, unfiltered, surged to the surface. A tear slid down his cheek. Then, another. He didn't speak. He just reached up and cupped her face gently, as if afraid she might vanish if he let go. "I thought I'd lost you," he whispered. "You almost did," she rasped. He gave a trembling laugh, part relief, part disbelief. "You've been out for a week," he said softly. "The doctors, they weren't sure." Lila tried to shift, wincing. Pain rippled through her chest and shoulder, but she didn't complain. Her eyes scanned the room, frantic suddenly. "My girls," she gasped. "Where are they?" "They're safe," Richard said quickly, gripping her hand tighter. "They're with me, at my home. They're okay." She stared at him. "You took them in?" "I didn't really have a choice," he said with a gentle smile. "They chose me." Relief crashed over her like a wave. She relaxed into the bed, tears pooling in her eyes. "Thank God." Richard wiped a strand of hair from her forehead, careful not to disturb the bandages. "They've been asking about you every day. Emma refuses to sleep without your bunny. Ella says she's going to teach me how to braid hair. Ellie, she just wants me to carry her everywhere." A small, broken laugh escaped Lila's lips. "Sounds about right." There was a beat of silence. Then she looked at him, really looked. His face was tired, but his eyes held something else, something softer, deeper. "Why?" she whispered. "Why would a man like you risk everything for someone like me?" Richard's gaze didn't waver. "Because someone once saved me," he said quietly, "and I never got the chance to return the favor until now." Lila blinked, tears spilling freely. He leaned in and pressed his forehead gently to her hand. "I'm not a hero, Lila. I just didn't want to see 3 little girls lose their whole world." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat closed from the weight of everything she'd held in for too long. But she didn't need to speak. In the silence, something unspoken passed between them. Not romance, not yet, but something far more sacred. Survival. Trust. The fragile beginning of something that had been born not out of fairy tales, but out of fire. And in that moment, with the beeping of the monitor steady and the morning sun slowly creeping into the room, Lila Summers knew. She wasn't alone anymore. The knock on the hospital room door was soft, but it made Lila flinch. Richard opened it gently and stepped inside, holding a manila envelope in one hand and a solemn expression on his face. "They found him," he said. Lila froze. "Derek?" Richard nodded. "Police arrested him late last night in a motel 2 states over. He was hiding under a fake name. They matched him to an outstanding warrant." Her hands trembled slightly on the bedsheet. What happens now?" "There will be a hearing. They want you to testify, if you're ready." Lila looked away. The color drained from her face. "I want to," she said, her voice barely audible. "I have to." Richard placed the envelope on the side table and reached for her hand. "Then you won't be alone." The courtroom was colder than she expected. Gray walls, hard benches, a silence that pressed down like a weight. Richard sat beside her, his presence solid, grounding. The girls sat in the row behind them with a court-assigned guardian. Pink dresses replaced with little cardigans and hair neatly brushed. Then the doors opened. 2 officers escorted Derek Cole into the room. His hair was longer, beard patchy. His hands were cuffed in front of him, and his eyes burned with something between rage and desperation. He spotted Lila instantly. "You lying," he shouted before the judge banged the gavel. "Mr. Cole, you will remain silent unless addressed." Derek ignored the warning. His voice echoed through the courtroom. "She took my kids. She stole my life. Those girls are mine." Lila shrank back slightly, shaking. Richard leaned closer. "You're safe," he whispered. "He can't touch you." She nodded, but her hands gripped the edge of her seat until her knuckles turned white. Testimony followed. The injuries, the past restraining orders, financial records, witness statements. Richard had hired the best lawyer he could find, and it showed. Derek grew more agitated with each passing moment, until finally, during a break, he locked eyes with the triplets seated behind Lila. "They're mine," he shouted, You hear me? You're mine." And then, clear as a bell, Emma stood up. Her voice cut through the noise, high and fierce. "You're not our daddy anymore." Gasps rippled across the room. Even the judge paused. Derek blinked, stunned into silence. Richard gently pulled Emma back into her seat, wrapping an arm around all three girls, who now sat huddled together, wide-eyed but brave. Lila turned back slowly. Their eyes met. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Later, when the gavel struck and the sentence was read aloud, 25 years without parole, Lila exhaled a breath she hadn't known she'd been holding. It was over. Outside the courthouse, the sky was soft with cloud cover, the air damp but calm. Lila stood on the steps, arms around her daughters, trembling now that the strength was no longer needed. She buried her face in their hair and sobbed, not from fear, but from release. Richard stayed a step behind, giving her space. When she turned slightly, shoulders shaking, he stepped forward without a word and draped his coat over her shoulders. The fabric swallowed her frame, warm and steady. It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it said everything. She looked up, eyes red, lips trembling. He didn't speak. He only met her gaze, and stayed. That was enough. Time passed like the slow bloom of spring after a brutal winter. Lila recovered steadily, her strength returning one day at a time. The bruises faded, the stitches were removed, but healing, real healing, took longer. She found a small apartment not far from the city center. It wasn't much, just 2 bedrooms, cracked tiles in the kitchen, and a leaky faucet, but it was hers. It was safe, and the girls finally had a place to call home. But even as she stood on her own again, Richard never left. Every evening, like clockwork, he showed up. Sometimes with groceries, sometimes with takeout. He picked the girls up from preschool, helped them with their reading, and taught them how to plunk simple melodies on the old keyboard Lila found at a second-hand shop. He became part of the rhythm of their lives. On rainy nights, he made grilled cheese and tomato soup. On Fridays, he helped braid their hair and tried, badly, to learn the names of all their dolls. They giggled when he burned pancakes. He laughed when they made him wear glitter stickers on his cheeks. And through it all, Lila watched him. Not as the CEO who once sat behind glass walls and billion-dollar deals, but as the man who never let go. One evening, after the girls had gone to bed and the dishes were drying in the rack, she sat beside him on the worn-out couch. The room was quiet, save for the soft hum of city life through the open window. She turned to him. "Why do you keep showing up, Richard?" He glanced at her, amused. "I like your cooking." She raised an eyebrow. He chuckled. Then, more seriously, he said, "Because I want to." "You have everything already," she murmured. "Money, power, freedom. Why this?" His smile softened. Eyes locked on hers. "Everything," he said, "except what matters." Lila didn't speak. Her heart ached in a way that was no longer painful, just full. Days turned into weeks. The girls' laughter returned louder than ever. Lila smiled more easily. And Richard seemed lighter, like a man who had found his place without even realizing he was looking. Then came her birthday. Richard organized it without telling her. She walked into her apartment that afternoon to the smell of cake, balloons taped crookedly to the walls, and the sound of 3 giggling girls wearing handmade party hats. He stood in the kitchen, holding a lighter in one hand. "Don't worry," he said. "The fire department's on standby." She laughed. Her eyes sparkled with something she hadn't felt in years. They turned off the lights. A small cake with flickering candles sat on the table. The girls gathered around her, their faces glowing in the candlelight. "Make a wish, Mommy," Ellie whispered. Lila looked at them. Emma with frosting on her nose, Ella bouncing on her toes, Ellie clinging to Richard's pant leg, and then at the man standing quietly behind them all. "I already have," she said. They sang. They ate. And later, when the girls were tucked into bed and the apartment had gone still, Lila stepped onto the small balcony, cradling a mug of tea. Richard followed, standing beside her in the warm night breeze. She turned slightly. Her bandaged hand rested on the railing, still healing from the fracture. Without a word, he reached out and covered it with his. Then, gently, hesitantly, he brought it to his lips and pressed the softest kiss against her knuckles. It wasn't passionate. It wasn't urgent. It was quiet, steady, a promise made without words. In that moment, nothing else existed. Not fear, not the past. Just two people, damaged, brave, still learning to breathe again, standing side by side in the dark, finding something that looked a lot like peace. Something that felt like the beginning of love. A year later, the corner of Maple and 8th had transformed. Where a dusty, forgotten storefront once stood, now bloomed a cheerful boutique with a pale pink awning and crisp white trim. Above the door, delicate lettering read, 3 Stars Boutique. Inside, sunlight poured through the windows, lighting up the shimmer of tiny satin dresses hanging in neat rows, each handmade, each unique. Near the register sat a framed photo, 3 little girls in matching pink, twirling in a meadow of wildflowers. Lila Summers stood at the heart of it all. Her blonde hair was tied back, a few curls softening her cheeks. She wore a simple white dress, elegant yet modest. As guests arrived for the grand opening, her fingers nervously smoothed the fabric over and over. She had done it. Her own designs, her own shop, her own story. But not alone. The door chimed, and in walked Richard, tall, confident, and smiling with that familiar gentleness. In one hand, a bouquet of peonies and baby's breath. In the other, Emma's hand, swinging happily. Ella and Ellie followed behind, waving glittery signs. "We're proud of you, Mommy." "Daddy Richard, look." Emma pointed to a dress on a mannequin. "I picked those buttons." He knelt and kissed her forehead. "A perfect choice. You've got the eye." Laughter and warmth filled the boutique. Neighbors, friends, even some of Lila's first online customers came to celebrate. There were cookies shaped like stars, pink lemonade, and a playlist of the girls' favorite songs floating through the air. Then, the music paused. Lila stepped forward, cheeks glowing, holding a small note card to thank everyone. Before she could speak, Richard gently took the card from her. "May I?" he asked. Surprised, she nodded. Facing the crowd, he began, voice calm but steady. "I thought you changed your mind that night." The room fell silent. "I thought maybe I'd imagined it all. Those moments, those feelings. That maybe someone like me wasn't meant for this kind of life." He took a breath and reached into his pocket. "But then, your little girls found me, and they didn't just ask me to save you, they saved me too." A soft murmur swept through the guests as he knelt on one knee. He held up a ring, simple, platinum, 3 small stones surrounding a diamond. "Lila Summers," he said, eyes shining. "Will you marry me?" 3 excited voices shouted in unison behind him. "Say yes, Mommy. Please say yes." Tears sprang to Lila's eyes. She laughed through them, one hand over her heart. She nodded. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, smiling through tears. "Yes." Applause erupted. The girls ran to her, hugging her tight. Richard rose and wrapped his arms around all 4 of them. Outside, the sky glowed in warm shades of orange and lavender. A gentle breeze stirred the dresses in the window. On the sidewalk, the girls twirled in their pink dresses, arms wide, hair flying. As they stepped into the golden light together, 1 man, 1 woman, and 3 little stars, Richard leaned close to Lila and whispered, Sometimes love finds us when we're running to save someone else. She reached for his hand, and this time, she never let go. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we never planned but fought to build with love, trust, and second chances. Richard, Lila, and the girls remind us that healing takes courage, and love often finds us in our most broken moments. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Kindness and Love Tales for more emotional journeys filled with hope, kindness, and love that conquers all. Your next favorite story is just one click away. Join our growing family today.